The conference room at Sterling Tech was ice cold in every way that mattered. Glass walls, gleaming table, rows of suits worth more than most people's yearly salaries. And at the head of the room, CEO Bradley Morrison, livid. 3 days, he growled, slamming a folder on the mahogany table. $3 million in losses. The numbers bounced off the chrome and marble like bullets. His voice carried weight, the kind that crushed people. Our servers are down, our clients are panicking, and you, all of you, he gestured to the cluster of top engineers seated stiffly, have given me nothing but excuses. The air felt electric with discomfort. Then, without ceremony, the door at the back opened. In walked a man with a rolling gray trash cart. His footsteps were soft. His presence went unnoticed until Morrison turned and saw him. DeShawn Williams, the night janitor. Mid-40s, quiet, wore old sneakers and a faded uniform with his name stitched across the chest, the kind of man people passed in hallways without seeing. Morrison saw him now and smirked. "Well," he sneered, "maybe our janitor can fix what our $200,000 geniuses can't." A ripple of laughter broke out, nervous but real. One exec even snorted. DeShawn kept moving, slowly, silently. He didn't flinch. Morrison wasn't done. "No, I'm serious," he said, his voice rising. "DeShawn, you fix this server mess by Monday morning, I'll give you my monthly salary, $50,000 straight up." That quieted the room. DeShawn stopped. The silence stretched long enough for discomfort to settle in. He didn't look at Morrison, not at first. Instead, his right hand drifted to the pocket on his chest. Inside was something cold, small, familiar. A silver butterfly hair clip. His wife, Danielle's. The last thing she gave him before everything in his life cracked in half. Before the accident. Before he buried her and their daughter, Emma. That clip had stayed with him ever since. He could still hear her voice, soft but fierce. "Promise me you'll never stop building beautiful things, even when the world breaks you." His hand tightened. DeShawn slowly looked up, meeting Morrison's eyes. There was no anger in his face, no fear either. Just the quiet strength of a man who had already lost everything. "I accept your challenge, Mr. Morrison." A low, stunned hush fell over the room. One of the investors coughed. Someone else adjusted their tie. They were expecting a broken man to shuffle away. What they got instead was the first step in the resurrection of someone they never really saw coming. Detroit in November had a way of biting through your coat and into your bones. The wind didn't whisper, it accused. The streets glistened with cold rain and unfinished promises. Sterling Tech towered above the broken sidewalks like a monument to progress. Glass, steel, and ambition, but DeShawn knew better. Some ghosts couldn't be buried under 10 floors of innovation. Each night, he entered through the back, past the dumpsters, past the humming generators, past the security guard who didn't bother looking up anymore. Just the janitor. Same old uniform, same worn shoes. But inside that uniform was a man who had once been a legend. DeShawn Williams had been Marcus Thompson. The Marcus Thompson. Child prodigy from the south side of Chicago, MIT at 16. Published his first security framework at 19. By 22, he was leading teams at Microsoft. By 30, his algorithms were reshaping cloud architecture. And then came the crash. Not a system crash, a car crash. One rainy night, a distracted driver, one red light. And just like that, Danielle and their daughter Emma were gone. He never even saw the wreck, only the aftermath, only the silence. He walked away from everything, changed his name, took a job nobody would question, because nobody ever questions the janitor. In his small apartment in Corktown, cardboard boxes lined the walls. His old degrees, framed articles, awards, Emma's drawings. He hadn't opened them in 3 years. But one thing stayed close. Danielle's butterfly hair clip. Silver, simple, the kind she wore on their wedding day. Inside the curve of the wings, she had engraved the words, "Build beautiful things." Each night before work, he held it like a prayer. Not to remember who he was, but to remember who he loved. In the dark corners of Sterling Tech, no one looked at him twice. Engineers passed him with distracted glances, some with annoyance, others with that cold, polite indifference that doesn't hide anything. One, though, noticed. Sarah Chen. She was young, Korean-American, a mid-level developer who had to fight for her seat at the table every day. While the others ignored him, she nodded, said thank you, even asked once what music he played on his cracklin' old radio. Motown, he'd said, Marvin Gaye, Diana Ross, real music. She smiled. My mom still plays Stevie Wonder on vinyl. It had been such a simple exchange, but it was the first time in years he'd felt like a human being. After the meeting with Morrison, after the insult, the challenge, DeShawn returned to his supply closet. He sat on a plastic crate, heart pounding from more than embarrassment. He pulled out the clip, rubbed his thumb over the engraving. Build beautiful things. The words hit differently now. For the first time in 3 years, his fingers ached, not from mopping, but from the need to type. He turned the radio on low. Aretha Franklin's voice flowed out like balm. DeShawn clipped the butterfly to his uniform, just over his heart. Not as a janitor's badge, as a promise. Saturday morning, the building was hushed, stripped of its weekday arrogance. No clacking heels, no espresso machines, just fluorescent lights buzzing over exhausted faces. The IT floor looked like a war zone. Monitors flashed red warnings. Someone was asleep at their desk. Empty energy drink cans lay scattered like spent shell casings. No one had gone home. DeShawn walked in, quiet, unnoticed, until he wasn't. David Richardson spotted him first. Head of IT, white, mid-50s, balding, eyes like cold glass. "What the hell are you doing here?" he barked, not even trying to be polite. "I'd like access to the server logs," DeShawn said calmly. Richardson laughed, loud, sharp, like it felt good to finally have someone to mock. "You serious? This is a multi-million-dollar system meltdown, not a mop handle you can jiggle until it stops squeaking." A few tired engineers looked up. One of them, Lisa Walsh, smirked. "Let him try, Dave," she muttered. "What's the worst that could happen? He clogs the internet?" Laughter flickered, thin and bitter. Richardson crossed his arms. "Fine, you want to embarrass yourself? Be my guest." DeShawn sat down at an open terminal. He didn't rush. He didn't talk. He just read. Error logs, process stacks, thread loops, server behavior patterns that would look like noise to the untrained eye, but not to him. Within minutes, he saw it. A recursive loop buried deep in legacy code. Elegant, sinister. It wasn't just a crash. It was planted, hidden. A time bomb counting down, waiting for the perfect moment to implode everything. Marcus Thompson would have smiled at the artistry of it. DeShawn Williams didn't. He minimized the window and stood. "There's a recursive function hiding inside your client directory code," he said quietly. "It's flooding your servers with false memory requests. That's why the system's folding in on itself." Richardson blinked, confused, then angry. "Where did you see that?" "In the logs." "You shouldn't have that kind of access." "I didn't. I just followed the trail." Richardson's smile twisted. "Let me fix that for you." He moved to his own terminal and, click, revoked DeShawn's login. For security reasons, he said, can't just let anyone dig around in our infrastructure. You should stick to cleaning actual messes, Williams, not creating new ones. DeShawn stared at him. For a second, his old self wanted to rise up, explain to this man how wrong he was, how out of his depth he truly stood. But then he remembered Danielle, her voice, her patience, her joy when she cracked a problem that no one else saw. Sometimes the best code is the simplest solution. He said nothing. That night, when the building was dark again, DeShawn came back. Janitor's master key in hand. Security logs didn't track the invisible. He slipped into the server room, logged in under a maintenance account nobody had touched in months, and got to work. He didn't need access. He needed answers. The recursive loop was only the beginning. Something about it felt too precise, too perfect. By 3 a.m., he had mapped the full structure. It wasn't a mistake, it was sabotage. And whoever wrote it had access to everything. As his fingers danced across the keyboard, old instincts returned. It wasn't just muscle memory, it was soul memory. He whispered under the empty room, "You always said I could see what others miss, Danielle." He glanced at the clip on his chest. Maybe it's time I remind them what that looks like. He leaned back in the chair. His eyes scanned the code once more. He knew how to fix it, but he couldn't do it alone. He needed someone inside, someone who believed him, someone brave enough to bet on a janitor's word. He thought of one name and smiled. The break room was nearly empty, only the hum of vending machines and the flicker of fluorescent light overhead. Sarah Chen sat at the far end, elbows on the table, eyes glued to her screen. Her tea had gone cold hours ago, and her bun sagged like her mood. She didn't look up when the door opened. "I need your help," DeShawn said, voice low but steady. Sarah glanced up, puzzled. "DeShawn, help with what?" "I know what's breaking the system," he replied. "It's not a hardware failure. It's a recursive loop, intentionally hidden inside legacy code. Whoever planted it knew exactly what they were doing." Her brow lifted. "You're saying this was sabotage?" He handed her a few folded pages, screenshots, diagrams, hand-marked annotations. She unfolded them slowly, reading line by line. "This is not amateur work," she murmured. "I've been teaching myself on the night shift," DeShawn said simply. She looked at him, eyes narrowing. "No offense, but this isn't the kind of thing you teach yourself while cleaning floors." He said nothing. Instead, he reached into his chest pocket and pulled out a small silver butterfly hair clip. "This was my wife's," he said, "Danielle. She was an engineer. Always said I had a gift for seeing patterns. Before she passed, she made me promise I'd keep building beautiful things. I haven't touched code since." The quiet in the room deepened. Sarah stared at the clip for a long second, then at DeShawn, really seeing him now. There was something behind his eyes, a sorrow too deep for words, and beneath that, brilliance, quiet, smoldering, undeniable. She thought of the times her ideas had been dismissed, the times she was talked over in meetings, the times Richardson rolled his eyes when she offered solutions. And here was someone who had likely faced all of that and more. "If I help you," she said, "we'd do this in secret. If anyone finds out, I could lose my job." "I understand," he said. "I've been invisible for 3 years. I know how to stay that way." They got to work. Sarah used her login credentials to access deeper layers of code. DeShawn guided her through each section, his explanations clear, precise, like someone who had designed systems, not just studied them. The two of them moved like dancers, quiet, coordinated, unspoken rhythm. By 3 a.m., they had a full map of the vulnerability. It was a logic bomb, timed perfectly, targeting critical systems, and it hadn't come from outside. It came from someone inside. They saved everything to a secure folder and parted without a word. But on Monday, the walls began to close in. Richardson had brought in a consulting firm, high-priced outsiders with fancy jackets and vague resumes. "We can't risk company stability on internal experiments," he told Morrison, "especially not janitors pretending to be engineers." Worse still, Jake Martinez had seen Sarah and DeShawn together in the server room. He went straight to Richardson. By noon, the hammer dropped. Morrison stormed onto the IT floor, holding a printed access log like it was a warrant. Unauthorized login credentials, system tampering, from a janitor? DeShawn stood calmly. "I found the issue. I can fix it. All I'm asking for is 5 minutes to prove it." Morrison sneered. "You've got 3 minutes to clean out your locker." And then Sarah stepped forward. "I gave him access," she said, voice shaky but strong. "I reviewed the code. He's right. It's brilliant." Gasps, silence. A young Asian American woman standing beside a black janitor challenging the hierarchy. Morrison clenched his jaw. "Fine, 5 minutes. If you fail, you're both gone." DeShawn glanced down at the silver clip pinned to his shirt. Danielle's words rang in his mind once more. Build beautiful things. It was time to step out of the shadows. The conference room was full again, but this time, no one was laughing. DeShawn stood at the front, next to a whiteboard and a large screen. His janitor's uniform looked out of place among the pressed suits and collared shirts. Sarah sat beside him, stiff but resolute. The air was thick with doubt. Morrison leaned back in his chair. 5 minutes. Go. DeShawn connected his laptop. His fingers didn't tremble. He began slowly, explaining the structure of the system crash, not with guesses or jargon, but with calm precision. He broke down the recursive loop, identified its origin, and explained how it had slipped past every failsafe. As he spoke, the room changed. Smirks faded, eyebrows rose, phones were set down. Even Richardson, standing at the back, stopped checking his watch. DeShawn's voice remained steady, but inside, something stirred. Something he hadn't felt in years. Not fear, not anger, pride. For a moment, he faltered, just slightly. Then his hand moved, almost unconsciously, to the silver butterfly clip pinned to his chest. Danielle. He remembered her face as she debugged code beside him late into the night. Her laughter when he cracked a complex encryption. Her voice whispering, "Build beautiful things." He took a breath. Then he clicked to the final slide. 3 lines of code. Simple, elegant. "This is the patch," he said. "It neutralizes the loop without affecting system load. In fact, it improves efficiency by 30%. We don't need to rebuild. We just need to correct the logic." The consultants stared. One of them, a bearded man from San Francisco, leaned forward. "You wrote this?" DeShawn nodded. Sarah added, "I ran simulations. It works. Perfectly." Morrison's jaw tensed. "Where did you learn this?" "I've always been good with puzzles," DeShawn replied. The room stayed silent for a moment. Then, reluctantly, Morrison gave the signal. "Run it. Sandbox server. Now." A developer nearby launched the patch in a test environment. Seconds ticked by like hours. Then, green lights, stable server load, increased speed. Applause rippled through the room, tentative at first, then growing. DeShawn stood still, letting it wash over him, but not into him. This wasn't about applause. This was about Danielle. Morrison cleared his throat, trying to regain control. Lucky guess. DeShawn looked at him, eyes calm. "Not luck," he said. "I've identified at least 3 other vulnerabilities in your system. If left unpatched, they'll cost you millions." The room fell silent again. He had just gone from janitor to threat in 5 minutes flat. Morrison didn't smile, but he nodded. "Fine, fix them, by Friday. Then we'll talk." DeShawn nodded once. As he turned to leave, Sarah followed. "You sure you want to keep going?" she asked. He looked down at the clip on his chest. "I stopped building when Danielle died. But this This might be the first thing I've built since. They walked out together. Behind them, a room full of people were no longer sure who the janitor really was. The week that followed was a storm. By day, DeShawn pushed his janitor's cart down sterile hallways, emptying trash cans and scrubbing tiles. By night, he became something else entirely, a ghost in the machine, diving deeper into Sterling Tech's codebase than any of its paid engineers had ever dared. He worked alone at first. Then Sarah started staying late, covering for him, running interference, double-checking every fix. Together, they uncovered flaw after flaw, vulnerabilities hidden in plain sight, misrouted data channels, old code patched with duct tape logic. By Thursday, DeShawn had rebuilt nearly the entire back-end security architecture from scratch, quietly, precisely, invisibly. But success had a price. People started to notice. Young engineers began asking him questions, real ones, not about trash bags, but encryption protocols and data shielding. They didn't look at him the same way anymore, and neither did Richardson. He watched from a distance, his eyes colder now, nervous. "He's a janitor," he muttered to Morrison behind closed doors. "Yet he's fixing things that took my team years to design. That's not possible. Not unless—" "Unless what?" Morrison asked. "Unless he's stealing code, or worse, he's planted it himself." "You think he sabotaged us?" Morrison frowned. "I think we need to know who he really is." That night, DeShawn sat alone in the supply closet, staring at lines of code scrolling across his screen. And then he saw it. A trace. Buried in access logs from months ago. The original trigger of the recursive loop. A login path rerouted through a shell account. The signature? Richardson's. It wasn't just incompetence, it was sabotage. DeShawn's stomach twisted. He showed Sarah the evidence the next morning. Her face paled. "He planted it to make himself look indispensable," she whispered. "He crashed the system to become the hero. And now he's watching me become that instead," DeShawn said quietly. Richardson made his move that afternoon. He stormed into Morrison's office with a thick file of accusations. "He's not who he says he is," Richardson declared. "There's no way a janitor has this kind of technical knowledge. He's a fraud or a thief." Morrison was skeptical but rattled. "What's your proof?" "I want you to give him a test," Richardson said, "live, in front of the entire team. If he's real, he'll solve it. If not, we fire him before this becomes a lawsuit." Privately, Richardson set a trap. He embedded new code, sloppy, unstable, designed to trigger faults, and planned to blame DeShawn for the damage. Then he planted forged messages in the system, framing DeShawn as a corporate spy. But Sarah found the scheme. She came to DeShawn breathless. "He's going to frame you. He's setting up a data leak and your name's on it." DeShawn didn't flinch. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves. That night, he stayed until dawn. No sleep, no breaks, no margin for error. He rewrote Sterling Tech's entire security framework, a full system overhaul, something that should take a team of 15 engineers 3 months, done in one night. When the sun rose, his patch was live. Not only had he blocked Richardson's trap, he'd created a system so airtight that Sterling Tech could qualify for federal security contracts. Friday morning, the company gathered again. Richardson was already waiting, smug. "He's going down," he whispered to a colleague. DeShawn entered quietly, as always. But this time, he wasn't there to clean anything. He was there to expose everything. Friday afternoon, emergency all-hands meeting. Employees packed the conference room shoulder to shoulder. Engineers, HR, interns, even the cleaning staff lingered in the back. On the projector screen, lines of logs and code flashed. Richardson stood tall in front of the crowd, pointer in hand, voice booming. "This is what corporate espionage looks like," he announced. "Security logs, unauthorized access, code theft." Behind him, red boxes surrounded timestamps and folder names, all linking to one name, DeShawn Williams. He accessed proprietary code, implemented dangerous changes, used external encryption libraries from unknown sources. People murmured, confusion, suspicion, fear. Richardson turned to the audience. No janitor, no matter how clever, could build the kind of system we're seeing now, unless he was working with someone, unless he was someone else entirely. He spun back to the screen. "I believe this man is not who he claims to be. He may, in fact, be Marcus Thompson." Gasps, heads turned. "Marcus Thompson's," someone whispered. Richardson pointed at DeShawn. "Prove me wrong." The room froze. All eyes turned to the man in the janitor's uniform. DeShawn stepped forward slowly, calm, unshaken. He reached up, unclipped Danielle's butterfly pin from his shirt, and placed it gently on the table. "This belonged to my wife," he said, voice low but clear. "She believed in building beautiful things. She's the reason I'm standing here now." He turned to the whiteboard, where Richardson had scribbled a complex challenge, lines of quantum encryption algorithms only top-level engineers would understand. DeShawn didn't flinch. He picked up a marker and started to write. He didn't just solve the problem, he rewrote it, improved it, then explained line by line where Richardson's logic had failed. Halfway through, people started whispering. By the end, they were staring, mouths open, eyes wide. He stepped back. No applause, just stunned silence. Then Richardson snapped. "This is a trick," he shouted. "He is Marcus Thompson. He's been lying to you all. He faked his own death. He's probably stealing code and selling it." The accusation hung in the air, wild and desperate. And then Sarah stepped forward. "No," she said firmly, "the only thief here is you." She plugged in her laptop, clicked a file, displayed logs and access history, a full forensics trail. "You crashed our system. You planted the recursive loop, and you've been siphoning money through fake consultant contracts for months." Morrison stood, face pale. Is this true? Richardson panicked. "This is a setup. They're lying. This whole thing." Then he made a fatal mistake. "You're all being fooled by this." He stopped himself, but the word had already formed on his lips. It was a slur. The room went silent. Every ounce of professionalism cracked. His mask dropped. The man they once trusted stood exposed, not as a leader, but as a fraud fueled by fear and hate. A young black intern near the back stood up, then another, then an Asian software engineer, then a Latino analyst. Voices, one by one. "We believe DeShawn. We believe Sarah. We're done with this." Morrison looked at DeShawn, quiet, steady, dignified. "I'm not here to be better than anyone," DeShawn said. "I'm just here to honor my wife's memory and build something that matters." The room at last erupted, not in chaos, but in something deeper, respect. The room stayed frozen for a beat longer, then erupted, not in chaos, but in clarity. Morrison turned to security. "Escort Mr. Richardson off the premises, immediately." The guards didn't hesitate. Richardson sputtered, still trying to shout, still trying to explain. No one listened. His power had drained out of the room like water from a cracked pipe. As they dragged him away, a weight lifted from the air. For the first time in years, DeShawn stood without shame in the center of the very world that once erased him. Morrison cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology," he said, facing DeShawn. "I let my pride and prejudice blind me. I humiliated a man who just saved this company." He didn't offer excuses, just a pause. Then, "I want to make this right." That afternoon, Morrison called DeShawn into his office. For the first time, the tone was different, not commanding, not dismissive, but careful, human. "I'd like to offer you the CTO position," he said. "Chief Technology Officer, full benefits, equity, a team of your choosing. You've earned it." DeShawn didn't answer right away. He looked out the window. Detroit's skyline glimmered under gray November light. "I'm not looking to manage people," he said finally. "I'm looking to build again." He declined the CTO title, but accepted a role as Senior Systems Architect, a quiet position with deep influence. No spotlights, just a desk, a keyboard, and the freedom to create. The first thing he placed on his new desk was Danielle's butterfly hair clip, not hidden in his pocket this time, but in full view. A symbol no longer of grief, but of return. Across the floor, Sarah Chen's promotion came swiftly. She was named lead developer, recognition long overdue. Her collaboration with DeShawn became the foundation of a new era for Sterling Tech. Together, they revised hiring policies, mentorship programs, and team structures. They sought out underrepresented talent, people overlooked, underestimated, unseen, people like they once were. DeShawn didn't crave headlines, but they came anyway. TechCrunch ran the story. From janitor to genius, the man who rewrote the rules at Sterling Tech. They never printed his old name. They respected his silence. But inside the industry, word spread. A man with Marcus Thompson's mind was back, and this time he was building with purpose, not for profit. He started speaking, rarely but powerfully, at conferences about race, resilience, and redemption in tech. Not as a victim, not as a hero, but as a builder, a survivor, a man still in motion. And when his first paycheck from the new role cleared, he did something small but powerful. He opened a scholarship fund in Danielle's name, the Danielle Foundation for Hidden Talent in Tech. It would pay tuition for students from underrepresented backgrounds who showed promise in system architecture and cybersecurity. "I don't want anyone else to bury their gifts just to survive," he told Sarah. That Friday night, long after everyone else had gone home, DeShawn stayed behind. He found himself walking the same halls he once mopped. Only now, young programmers passed him and said, "Hey, DeShawn, got a minute?" He always said yes. The code still mattered, but now, so did the people writing it. 1 year later, Sterling Tech looked like a different company. The glass walls were still there, the sleek desks, the fast servers, the high ceilings. But something deeper had changed. Conversations. People listened differently now. More voices at the table, more accents in the room, more women leading meetings, more chairs pulled up for people who used to stand in the back. At the heart of it all was a team of 15 engineers, hand-picked, diverse, brilliant. They called themselves the Butterfly Corps. Their leader sat at a corner desk, quietly typing, always early, always calm. DeShawn Williams. Still not flashy, still not chasing titles. But the code they built together had redefined Sterling Tech's infrastructure. Their new cybersecurity suite had been adopted by 3 Fortune 500 firms and shortlisted for a government contract. People started calling it the Thompson Protocol. DeShawn never corrected them. He just kept building. On the first anniversary of Danielle and Emma's passing, he requested something from Morrison, something not for him, a garden. It sat just outside the south entrance, a quiet space surrounded by soft stone benches, climbing ivy, and a small fountain. In the center stood a simple plaque, "In memory of Danielle and Emma Thompson, who believed in building beautiful things." The day of the dedication, DeShawn finally told the truth. He stood before the company, hand steady, voice strong. "My name is Marcus Thompson. I was your janitor. Now I'm your architect. And none of that changes the most important thing about me. I loved someone who believed I could still build, even when I couldn't believe it myself." No one clapped at first. They just stood, in silence, out of respect. Then the applause began, slow, deep, meaningful. In the months that followed, DeShawn became a mentor, not just in code, but in life. His office became a refuge for anyone who felt invisible. He listened, advised, encouraged. The Danielle Foundation funded 25 scholarships in its first year. Some of the recipients visited Sterling Tech on weekends. DeShawn always made time for them. "Your job doesn't define your potential," he told them. "What you do with your pain does." He started dating again, not because he'd stopped loving Danielle, but because he finally believed she'd want him to keep living, to keep building. He still talked to her, in the garden, in quiet moments between lines of code, when the building was empty and the moonlight spilled across his desk. The butterfly clip sat in a small glass case beside his monitor. One day, a young black woman joined his team, fresh out of college, smart and sharp, full of doubt. She pointed at the clip. "What's that?" DeShawn smiled. "It's a reminder," he said, "to build beautiful things, even when the world tells you not to." The story closed not with applause or headlines, but with something better. A quiet room, humming with energy, screens glowing with code, voices collaborating across divides. And in the center of it all, a man who had once been broken, now whole, now building, not just systems, but people, culture, future. Not just the janitor, not just the genius, but the bridge between who the world throws away and who rises anyway.